So the topic of today's video is make money as you sleep. And to provide further insight on this topic, I'm going to share with you a story from Neville Goddard's book, The Law and the Promise. Now, this particular story I'm going to share with you is probably my favourite one in the book. And the reason it's my favourite is because it's the story of a lady who was in a very desperate situation. She'd pretty much given up hope. And because she'd given up hope, and because she no longer felt she had anything to lose by applying the methods, she dedicated herself to doing the pre-sleep method on a daily basis. And she experienced miraculous results at the end of it. So I'm going to share that story with you now, and in her own words, she says, "Most of us read and love fairy stories, but we all know that stories of unlikely riches and good fortune are for the delight of the very young. But are they? I want to tell you of something unbelievably wonderful that happened to me through the power of my imagination, and I am not young in years. We live in an age which believes in neither fable nor magic, and yet everything I could possibly want in my wildest daydreams was given to me by the simple use of what you teach, that imagining creates reality, and that feeling is the secret of imagining. At the time this wonderful thing happened to me, I was out of a job and had no family to fall back upon for support. I needed just about everything. To find a decent job, I needed a car to look for it, and though I had a car, it was so worn out, it was ready to fall apart. I was behind in my rent, I had no proper clothes to seek a job, and today it's no fun for a woman of 55 to apply for a job of any kind. My bank account was almost depleted, and there was no friend to whom I could turn. But I had been attending your lectures for almost a year, and my desperation forced me to put my imagination to the test. Indeed, I had nothing to lose. It was natural for me, I suppose, to begin by imagining myself having everything I needed. But I needed so many things, and in such short order, that I found myself exhausted when I finally got through the list. And by that time I was so nervous I could not sleep. One lecture night I heard you tell of an artist who captured the feeling, or word as you called it, of "isn't it wonderful" in his personal experience. I began to apply this idea to my case. Instead of thinking of and imagining every article I needed, I tried to capture the feeling that something wonderful was happening to me, not tomorrow, not next week, but right now. I would say over and over to myself as I fell asleep, "Isn't it wonderful? Something marvellous is happening to me now." And as I fell asleep, I would feel the way I would expect to feel under such circumstances. I repeated that imaginary action and feeling for 2 months, night after night, and one day in early October I met a casual friend I hadn't seen for months, who informed me he was about to leave on a trip to New York. I had lived in New York many years ago, and we talked of the city a few moments and then parted ways. I completely forgot the incident. 1 month later, to the day though, this man called at my apartment and simply handed me a certified check in my name for $2,500. After I got over the initial shock of seeing my name on a check for so much money, the story that unfolded seemed to me like a dream. It concerned a friend I had not seen nor heard from in more than 25 years. This friend of my past, I now learned, had become extremely wealthy in those 25 years. Our mutual acquaintance who had brought the check to me had met him quite by accident during the trip to New York last month. During their conversation they spoke of me, and for reasons I was not to know, this old friend decided to share a portion of his great wealth with me. For the next 2 years, from the office of his attorney, I received monthly checks so generous in amount, they not only covered every necessary requirement of daily living, but left much over for all of the lovely things of life: a car, clothes, a spacious apartment, and best of all, no need for me to earn my daily bread. This past month, I received a letter and some legal papers to be signed which provide the continuation of this monthly income for the rest of my natural life. So this is a great story, isn't it? And it's a very powerful example this lady gives here of how imagining creates reality, or if you prefer, how belief creates reality. Now, let's just go back over some of the key points in this story, because there are a few here. So, she starts by mentioning that we live in an age which believes in neither fable nor magic. But then she goes on to say that everything she could possibly want in her wildest daydreams was given to her by the simple use of what Neville taught. And this is a really powerful point. She's saying here that although Neville's teachings seem the opposite of everything we've been taught from a young age, once she applied them, she quickly realised that Neville was onto something. And she was seeing the results of what Neville was teaching in her own life. And she was quite amazed by how simple life can be when you apply Neville's teachings in your own life. She then goes on to mention how desperate her situation was. She was out of a job, she had no family to support her, her car was worn out, she was behind on her rent payments, her bank account was almost empty, and she even felt that her age was a deeply limiting factor for her as well. But she had been attending Neville's lectures for a year almost, and this state of desperation she was in was now forcing her to try and test these methods out. She felt she had nothing to lose, so she thought, why not? Let's try it. I've got nothing to lose. Let's try Neville's methods out. Let's try these crazy ideas out. That imagining creates reality. What a mad idea that is, but I'm going to try it out in my own life and see what happens. This leads on to her experimenting with the methods themselves. So she starts off by trying to imagine each individual desire as fulfilled. But she quickly finds this is quite exhausting because there's so many different things that she wants to bring into her life. So she then touches on another teaching of Neville's where he simply told the person to capture the feeling or word of "isn't it wonderful?" And she used this one because it was a much simpler way for her to apply the methods. Now, she did this every night I should say, before she went to sleep. So she would fall asleep in this, capturing the feeling of these words. And she would say, "Isn't it wonderful? Something marvellous is happening to me now." And the important part of this, again, to emphasise, is this idea that she was capturing the feeling as she said these words. She wasn't just saying these words like a parrot would. She was saying them with feeling behind them. She was experiencing this feeling of this certainty that a miracle was happening in her life right there and right then. And the process of doing this before she fell asleep made this ever more powerful, because as we know, sleep is a great window of opportunity into the subconscious mind. So whatever you take into sleep will be deeply impressed on the subconscious, and she was really applying this very effectively. She was doing this just before sleep, and she was taking this feeling that there was a miracle about to happen in her life that was going to solve all of her problems, and she was taking that feeling into sleep, and of course that was becoming deeply, deeply impressed on her subconscious mind. And therefore, over that 2-month period where she was doing this repeatedly, she was repetitively imprinting or impressing that feeling on the subconscious mind, or that thought on the subconscious mind. She was shifting her belief systems. And therefore, although it didn't happen immediately, after that 2-month period, things started to unfold. She didn't see them unfolding immediately, but some chance coincidences started occurring, or synchronicity, shall we say. And then suddenly everything happened. Suddenly, overnight, she receives this check for $2,500 from a friend she hadn't seen for over 25 years. And the miracle has happened. But she just kept on working on the process itself before the miracle happened. So she persisted with this process despite not immediately seeing results. But eventually, obviously, it happens. And to make her story more astonishing, this isn't just an isolated check she receives from this person she hasn't seen for 25 years. He then continues to pay her monthly checks for the rest of her life on this planet. So she ends up at a point where she not only has a new car, clothes, and a spacious apartment, she no longer even needs to go out to work any longer because she's receiving these monthly checks. These very generous monthly checks. So to conclude this video today, this was the simple process of a lady that decided to shift her negative belief systems to new ones, to the expectancy that a miracle was going to occur in her life that was going to resolve all of her problems. And she did this incredibly successfully. Anyway, I hope this was inspiring to you today. Thanks very much. Bye for now.